Alright guys, welcome. Thanks for watching. We're going to be going through a sample response today. We've done a lot in class about looking at particular techniques and arguments and what writers are trying to do. But I thought it'd be important to actually look at this sample response and see it all come together. The expectation is if you're going to watch this video, you've already read the article on page 117 if you're analyzing and presenting argument textbooks. That's the red one. Remember, if you don't have your physical copy of that, there's the digital copy on Omnia in the file section, so make sure you get that up and have a read before you go into this. We're going to be looking at this sample response here on the right. Let's say that for ease that the student Jenny wrote this sample analysis. So we're going to see how Jenny analyzed this text from right, and we'll see what we can emulate. What we can steal. So in class we talked about, where's my little curve? There it is. We talked about, let's see if I can do this. I'm not very good at this part. Oh, there we go. ATEE, which is a great acronym. Remember, you can bring anything you like into the test. So I'll definitely be bringing that acronym, remembering that it is on the draw. Again, it's on Omnia for you. So we've got arguments. So that is basically what the author is trying to do. As in, when I say author, I don't mean Jenny, I mean our author of the persuasive text. This is how they're trying to do it. There we are. So the techniques and the examples, remember from the T and the E, how they're trying to do that thing, whatever it is. And then importantly, we've got effect. What effect is it supposed to have on the reader? And that is the why. The what, the how, the why, or ATEE, very important. And once again, I'll reiterate that this why is really where the marks are. The AT and E, the first E, they're all about scaffolding and giving and pointing you toward the why. This is the part that takes the critical thinking from the student. AT and E, the first one, they're given to you. We give you the text, you can see the arguments, you can see the techniques. So we don't really, that's not what you're being rewarded for. The why is where you get rewarded for actually decoding what that persuasive text is trying to do, or rather what the writer of that persuasive text is trying to do to the audience. So keep that in mind as we go through. Alright, so let's take a look. There were a couple of critical things. Once again, there is the sample introduction structure on Omnia. Feel free to use that. We're not going to use that here just because it's pretty straightforward, and we'll go through each of the individual elements in turn. So I've been a bit confusing there because I've introduced ATEE or reintroduced it, but really that's not what we want, and not what we're going to start with for our introduction. So let's take a look at the introduction. Jenny has written, in late 2014, a freelance radio producer, Tom Wright, wrote an opinion piece for the ABC's online forum, The Drum, to celebrate the wonder of modern flight. Alright, so straight up, a lot of information in that opening sentence. We've got the important stuff. We've got when this text was written. We've got who, the writer of the article, and sort of who he is, or the writer of the text. What type of text it is. So we've got when, who, what, and where. When, who, what, and where is what you want to include, and as done here, you can include that in one sentence. Now, just to reiterate, we spoke in class about text types. You could get any text. You could get an internet blog. You could get a brochure. You could get a speech. You could get anything. And it's a letter to the editor. Make sure you read the background that's included with the text to give you insight into what type of text it is. The only one that can be really confusing is an editorial or an opinion piece. But remember, the difference between the two, an opinion piece will have a writer attached to it. You know who wrote the piece. Whereas an editorial will be written by a publication. There'll be no specific writer attached because it's assumed to be the opinion of the piece. The opinion of the text, of the publication. So that's the way to differentiate those two. If there's no writer, you can generally assume it's an editorial, but if there is, you can generally assume it's an opinion piece. But just make sure you read that background because it will give you the ideas. All right, anyway, when, who, what, and where. Very important to establish early in your introduction. Now, you might think reading this to celebrate the wonder of modern flight that is the contention, but it is not really. That sentence there kind of, remember we spoke in class about including a context sentence at the beginning of your introduction, just to introduce the issue that is going to be explored. And this student, Jenny, has kind of chosen to do that later on, which is absolutely fine. This just gives some context as to the topic of the article that Jenny has decided to analyze. Now, yeah, you can do it wherever you like. We talked about doing it at the beginning of the introduction. You can definitely do that too. But it's not the contention, because remember, a contention is about having some kind of effect on the reader. What is the ultimate goal that this text has with regards to the reader? Let's read on and see if we can find it. Wright admonishes, or talks down to, or reprimands, tells off, that kind of thing. Wright admonishes his audience for their selfishness and reminds them of how lucky they are to have the luxury of global travel at their fingertips. So really, that is the contention here. We talked in class about contentions being either physical things, so you want your audience to go and vote in a particular way, or go clean up the streets, or go wear this particular clothing brand, or whatever it is, so some kind of physical action. Or it can be a mental action, or it could be a combination. But in this case, it's really a mental action. Wright wants the audience to change their opinion of flying. So keep that in mind. What is it that the audience, what is it if the writer of the persuasive text could wave a wand and change anything about their audience, one key thing, that's really the contention. What is it they want to change? And in this case, it's changing their opinion on air travel. What we've got here, the admonishing, that's really the tone. Now, on page 108 of that red book, there's a whole list of tones. I recommend you go and have a look. Maybe bookmark that page for yourself for use in the test. Because we do want to give some indication of the kind of emotion or mood of the text, because that will come into play with regards to the way that the text is written and how they're trying to code their audience. But yes, as you can see, an introduction's pretty straightforward. Where, who, when, what of the text itself. A little bit of context, why this issue is in the media. The tone, and most importantly, the contention. It's super important, guys, that you include a contention, because everything that you write should come back to that contention at some point, either explicitly or implied. Because remember, the contention is the reason that the text exists. There was a space in the marketplace for that contention that the writer wanted to convince his audience of something, and so it all starts with that contention. So it's really important that you indicate it early in your introduction. All right, so that's basically the introduction. Let's get back to the ATEE and see if we can identify the what, the how, the why of Jenny's analysis. So, Wright opens with an anecdote involving the well-known comedian Louis C.K. in an attempt to... Now, it's a little bit confusing. It doesn't go down there. Sorry, it goes back up to here. In an attempt to establish popular support for his view that we are too selfish in our attitudes to flying. So, very clearly here, we have our what. What is going on? And just as a side note here, once you have introduced the full name of your writer in your introduction, just use their last name after that. You don't need to write Tom or Tom Wright, just use the last name from then on. But I digress. So this is the what. Wright opens with an anecdote involving well-known comedian Louis C.K. That's what they're doing. And then this student, Jenny, has decided to jump into a little bit of the why they're doing that, in an attempt to establish popular support for his view that we are too selfish in our attitudes for flying. So we do have this structure ATEE and or the what, how, why. Feel free to mix that up. As long as it involves all three of those elements, you can decide to just go through sort of ATEE, or what, how, why. That's fine. But often a text is a lot more interesting to read if you sort of mix those elements up and merge them. As long as you have all three consistently throughout your text, you're good. Okay. In an attempt to establish popular support for his view that we are too selfish in our attitudes to flying. By agreeing with the comedian's criticism of our sense of entitlement, and I'm going to actually highlight that here because I want to try and highlight as many of these examples as possible, because these are all really good uses of drawing from the text. I've talked about the how being the technique and example. You need to quote as often as you can from the text, from the article itself. And to do that, I don't want you quoting huge chunks, because more often than not, it's only going to be a small section of that chunk, which is actually relevant and important. So that's the only bit that I want you drawing out of the text. As you can see here, it's just 3 words in quotation marks. And that's what you should be doing, and littering them throughout your analysis. So see if we can find some more here. The food, the elbows, the delays, the waiting is another one. We should stop acting spoiled. Our deep connection, land of my birth. So you can see how all of these examples are just a couple of words integrated into the analysis. And you can see how regular they are as well by highlighting them in this way. Every couple of sentences, you don't want to go really any more than that without quoting. That links your analysis back to the text. But once again, I digress. Boop. Okay. By agreeing with the comedian's criticism of our sense of entitlement, Wright is able to chastise readers without getting them offside, because he is merely agreeing with someone else's critique. So here we have a very clear why. So what is the writer doing? They're opening with an anecdote, persuasive technique, by well-known comedian Louis C.K. We have a quote from the text included in that how, and then we get to the good stuff, the part that's going to get you the marks, which is the why. Why is he quoting from a famous comedian? Because by doing so, Wright is able to criticize the audience without appearing too damning. Because remember, if you're writing a persuasive technique where you're criticizing your audience, the audience is very likely to just say, well, get lost. I don't want to listen to what you have to say anymore if I'm just going to sit here and be insulted. But by cleverly bringing in the words of Louis C.K., the comedian that maybe the audience might know and respect, the audience is less likely to feel too badly about getting criticized. So you can see how important it is that why is explained clearly, and why that's where all the marks are, because anyone can see that what and the how, because it's given to you in the article. The why is where you bring your own understanding and your own knowledge in. Alright, so let's move on, see if we can find some more of the what, the how, the why, or the ATEE. This positions readers to feel, and again, this is great here. This positions readers. This should be the focus. Always on how the reader is being set up, or as we say, very key word here, positioned. You should come back to this word over and over in your analysis, or synonyms of this word. This positions the reader, this frames the reader, this moves the reader to believe, whatever it is, that should be your focus. Always on how the writer is trying to influence the audience in some way. This positions readers to feel as though the author's view is not an isolated one, and encourages them to reflect upon their own attitude. So again, more why here. It's not just about making it feel like it's not just the right criticizing them, but also that a lot of people feel the same way as the author in this case. By concluding this argument with some inclusive admonishment, so remember we talked admonishment means like putting down or telling off, and bringing the quotes there. So by concluding this argument with some inclusive admonishment, quote, we should all stop acting so spoiled. So this is the inclusive part. Some inclusive admonishment. We is that inclusive language. If you go to your persuasive techniques in the textbook. We should all stop acting so spoiled. Wright manages to consolidate his view of our modern selfishness and elicit audience guilt without sounding too patronizing. So again, we've got our what, we've got our how, we've got our why. What is he doing? He's concluding his argument with inclusive admonishment. How is he doing that? Here is the example, the we. We should all stop acting so spoiled. And then what does that do? He manages to consolidate his view of our modern selfishness and elicit audience guilt without sounding too patronizing. Now, some of these words are a little bit scary, like elicits. Don't worry about it. It's not a vocabulary test at this point. All we're asking is that you get this structure down. What are they doing? How are they doing? Why are they doing it? All right. So don't see those and worry too much. If you are, it's all good. Just focus on that structure, and you will be a-okay. Without sounding too patronizing. He includes himself in the mix and therefore encourages readers to be similarly appreciative of the benefits of flying. So all Jenny is doing here, she's given us her why, and then she just expands on that a little bit just to make sure it's crystal clear about why Wright is trying to do what he's doing. So let's move on and see if it's continuingly that structure is clear. Having established the idea that our complaints are unjustified, so linking to what's already come ahead, Wright adopts a more emotive approach to establish his own gratitude and to convince readers that there is much to celebrate about air travel. So again, we're getting a very clear what here. Here is what has already been established. And remember, sorry, to take a step back, when we're analyzing persuasive text, all we're doing is working our way through the text from start to finish. So we're not jumping around a text like we are with a novel, where at the beginning of our analysis, our first body paragraph, we're looking at the start of the text and working our way down. So what are they doing to begin? What are they doing after that? What are they doing after that? Etc., etc., until you're through the entire text. So if you're going to have 3 key body paragraphs, for example, you might look at how does the writer begin their analysis, how does the writer continue their analysis, and how does persuasion, how does the writer conclude their persuasion or conclude their article or text or whatever it is. All right. So with that in mind, what Jenny has done, she's begun her analysis by looking at how the writer has opened his article. And now she's looking, all right, so now that we've established that element, what does Wright do next? Well, in this case, Wright adopts a more emotive approach to establish his own gratitude and to convince readers that there is much to celebrate about air travel. So again, it doesn't matter what exactly that thing is. All that matters is that Jenny is establishing what is happening next in the article. And then she's going to go into the how is he doing that with the techniques and the examples. By including an anecdote technique about his own sick parent and explaining the deep connection that he has formed with the route back to the land of my birth, again, connections, examples, Wright personalizes the issue and urges readers to consider the substantial emotional and social benefits of such travel, and therefore to dismiss the modern tendency to complain over trivial and petty problems. Again, the findings here don't really matter. We're not analyzing this text in the test. All that matters is the structure. And the structure here is really quite clear. What is the person doing? What is the writer of the persuasive text doing? How are they doing it? Using techniques and examples. And then why? Again, this is where the marks really come in. If you can tell your assessor, something nuanced and interesting, something they might have not even picked up in themselves, that's super exciting for an English assessor, an English teacher. So get on it. So what are they doing? How are they doing it? Why are they doing it? Let's move on, see if it continues. This social argument is strengthened with reference... do I skip ahead here? No. This social argument is strengthened with references to flying as a rare communal experience in an atomized world. So here, once again, let's get out our little highlighter. A rare communal experience, atomized world. Again, atomized is the only quote there. So again, we're seeing lots of little quotes sprinkled throughout our analysis. This is when text analysis is really at its strongest because as an assessor, we can see really clear links between the student's analysis and the text. I'm just going to quickly jot through here and try and get the rest of these techniques so you can actually just stand back and see just how often the text is quoted from. I might have missed a few in there, but that's all right. But you can see, look at all that, the clear quoting throughout. Really, really important. Let's go back to our pen. Okay. So what the student is doing here is they're just continuing with their why. They're just elaborating a little more on why Wright is doing what he's doing and why that might be effective in coding or positioning their audience. The student Jenny does something really clever here, which is something that I want you all to kind of strive for. They're linking what's going on in this later section of the article with what they started with. So you can see here, this social argument is strengthened with reference to flying as a rare communal experience in an atomized world. Here, and this is the important part, Wright cleverly appeals to a sense of community. Why? Which is at odds with the self-interest of the passenger on Louis C.K.'s flight. So they're linking something that happened later in the text with something that happened earlier in the text. And this might happen in your text. Something that happens later on in the text might be referencing something that's happened before. And by highlighting understanding of that reference, you're demonstrating a stronger understanding of the text. So just keep an eye out for those. It's not like there's going to be 3 and you need to hit them all. It's nothing so rigid as that. But just keep an eye out. If there seems to be at some point in the article that they're referencing something that's come before, just make reference of it. It just demonstrates a stronger understanding of the text as a whole. The author is essentially romanticizing the idea of flying by so here's again we're going back to the what. What is the author doing? They're romanticizing the idea of flying. How are they doing it? With techniques and examples. By emphasizing, is our technique, that we are, example, up close to humanity and its associated emotions, and therefore reminded of our interconnected lives. It is an idea that is reinforced by his multiple references to flying as, again, example, modern miracle, and is designed to counter, and this is why. So why is all this stuff included? Because it is designed to counter the cynicism of the opening anecdote with infectious positivity. Now again, it doesn't matter if you're going to be using words like infectious positivity or counter the cynicism. Don't worry about that. What matters is this structure. What's going on? How is it going on is in here. And why. That's the key. That's what's going to get you the marks on this test. All right, I think that's pretty straightforward. The last thing I want to go through and read the rest for yourself and try and get that what, the how, the why, the what, the how, the why. Last thing I wanted to bring in is the image. Now, we talked about visual language in class, but when do you bring the image into your analysis? We mentioned this, but just in case you've forgotten, you bring the image in when it links with whatever is being said in the text. So if you look at this example, the image is right here at the top of the article. So you might be tempted when you start your analysis to look at the image very early on. And maybe that's fine, but maybe it actually links more clearly with something later on in the article. So like these images, like linking back to things that have come before, you might, when you get down to this section here is when the image might come into play. So when you get to your analysis down to this moment is when you might say, this links back to the image. For my mind, this student Jenny could have brought the image in down here. So when you do your own reading, get to down to that section, maybe that's where you could have brought the image in. But there's no set rule. There might be somewhere else you think the image fits as well. It's whatever you think is important. You can treat the headline often in the same way. You don't necessarily have to analyze the headline immediately. Like the image, you might want to bring it in where you think it's most appropriate. But anyway, let's take a look at this image. you only really want, unless the image is quite complex, you only really want a couple of sentences to talk about what the image is trying to do. So in this image, we have a plane flying in the sky. That's pretty straightforward. That's not going to get you any marks. We want to look at how this plane is actually being presented. Now, you might already have your own ideas, but for me, the most striking feature of this image is this really soft, sort of pleasing color palette. These purples and blues and pinks. It's really calming. This light from the sun, it's almost this holy light in a sense, if you want to go that far with it. But it's again, it adds to that pleasing, pleasant atmosphere. It's designed in my mind to sort of deliberately counteract the associated terror that can be linked with flying. The plane itself is in silhouette. We can't see a brand or a country marking or flight path. And for my mind, that means that the plane could be any plane. It could be any plane that you've ever flown on or will fly on in the future, and that makes the image kind of universal. So even with those few things, we've got the same notion with an image. What is going on? Well, it's a picture of a plane in the sky. How is it presented? Pleasing colors. It's in silhouette. It's got that nice sort of glowing light in the background here. And why? Oh gosh, that's terrible. Sorry, guys. Why? In order to offset any terror or any fear that somebody might have. Another thing, actually, you could also mention is that the plane is in the top third, really, of this image. It's flying high. There's no danger of it plummeting. If it was down here in the dark clouds, that might be worse. That might be scary. But no, it's up here in the light, in the joy, in those soft colors. And like I said, so if I was to include that here, I might, because here Jenny is talking about how Wright has started listing off all the positives of flying. And I might include here, these positives of flying are further emphasized in the image that's associated with this text. In this image, we see a silhouetted plane, meaning that the plane could be any flight path or any country's carrier, in a very pleasing and calming light scheme of blues and pinks and purples. This is designed to make the reader feel calm about flying and to offset some of the negatives of flying that Wright previously established, so linking back earlier in the article. So it could be something as that simple, or it could go further and include the element that the plane is in the top third of the image in order to make it feel strong and light, whatever you need. So yeah, that's, as you can see, a very simple example. I highly recommend you go through and read the rest of that analysis. There's a few other sample analyses in the textbook as well. Have a read and see if you can map the what, the how, the why, the what, the how, the why, the ATEE. Do yourself a favor, highlight all the times that the text has been highlighted, and you'll see, the text has been quoted, and you'll see how often that's done, and that's how often you should be striving for as well. Remember, you'll have the text in class. And yeah, so I highly recommend you go and do that. If you have any questions, if you have an introduction or a couple of body paragraphs or a whole analysis you want to send to me, please do. That's absolutely fine. If you read these examples and you come across words that you're unsure of, look them up, find out the meanings, but also remember, don't worry so much about that for this test. All I want you to be demonstrating is what, how, why, with specific emphasis on that what. If you have any questions or examples, please email me. Thanks for watching. I know it's probably hard to do when you've got the day off, but I think it's very important. All right, have a great one, and I'll see you back at school.